I'm going to invite Ashok Mathur up, and Ashok has contributed for many years, not even sure how many, Ashok, many years to the Indigenous Arts Summer Intensive, and I've had the pleasure to attend previously as an artist, and found that even today I still think about some of the panels, the keynotes, and the conversations that were had at previous artists in residence. So I'm very thankful for all of the work that has gone into that. Importantly, also Canada Council for the Arts has funded the Indigenous Arts Summer Intensive for a number of years. So both Stephen Foster, Ashok Mathur, Peter Morin, Toby Lawrence, many others of you who have done a lot of core organizing. I'm very thankful to build on the legacy of which you have brought forward. So Ashok is at the Ontario College of Art and Design, and he's out here visiting with a number of students and folks also from OCAD, and very happy that Ashok is here, bringing such interesting dynamic conversations with your group. And Ashok's going to be facilitating today, so I'm going to invite Ashok up. Thank you. Jen.
I'm going to do this from over here so I don't interfere with the process. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I want to begin by saying how grateful I am to be here in Sylph Territory, a place I have known as inspirational thanks to the many, many gracious hosts of this land. I also feel it's important to note that this university came into being alongside a critically important memo of agreement with the Okanagan Nation Alliance that acknowledges the history of this land and its people, something we must always remember. This place has been my home, and now I visit here, again thanks to the grace of many people, many sitting here. We have numerous speakers today, including several from the Sylph community, so a full afternoon of words and territory and ideas and art. My name is Ashok Mathur. I was born in Bhopal, India, to parents who hailed from a Hindu Kayast and Parsi Zarathustra community. The Kayasts are a subcaste of people often known for their clerical and writerly capacities. My father's father was what was termed in colonial India as a census taker, but the title understates the duties he held, which was to travel into regions and to write narratively about the people and places. I still have his original notebooks and I cherish them. My mother's father was a dastur, that is, a Parsi priest, and also a businessman. And indeed, the British-owned distillery that he managed, and the stories told by my late mother, Perrin Pantaki, inspired the last major novel that I wrote. The Parsis, or as they often name themselves, Zarathustras, or followers of Zoroastrianism, were originally from the areas we now know as Iran and Iraq, historically known as Persia, hence the derivative name of Parsi. They fled persecution in that region about 1400 years ago and came to the west shores of India, where they resided on the island of Diu for almost 2 centuries before coming to the banks of Gujarat. There's a story that the Raj of Gujarat told the Dastur who led the Zarathustras to India that his land was full of people and could take no more. This Dastur asked the Raj for a glass of milk, filled to the brim, which he was granted, and he proceeded to put spoonful after spoonful of sugar into the milk. "We come into your land, but see how we do not overfill the glass," he said. "More so, my people will add sweetness to your already thriving community." The Raj, so impressed by the science experiment and metaphor, allowed the Parsis to settle in Gujarat, where many generations have lived since, amongst the original inhabitants in peace. My father was a doctor, my mother a nurse. In another time, she herself would have trained in medicine, but despite coming from a family seen as progressive at the time, as a woman, there was no possibility for her entering medical school. Indeed, even nursing school, which she began at the age of 14 because she had accelerated through her grade school education as the top student in the entire region, was a stretch. She told me that she stayed in her room and wept for 3 weeks because her father would not permit her to study, deciding instead she should marry a good Parsi boy from town. Her mother told her husband that if he did not permit their daughter to go to nursing school, she would surely die from the depression born of such denial. Her father reluctantly listened to his wife and allowed my mother to attend nursing school far away. She became a nurse, and some years later met my father, not a good Parsi boy, but a Hindu intern, a border crossing act that was greeted with considerable disfavor by her parents. Parsis did not marry Hindus in the 1950s. Their marriage was trouble for both families, and in time this precipitated their immigration to England, an act made possible because Indian citizens were considered British subjects. Then, with toddler daughter and baby son in tow, they came to a different colony, first to the east coast of Canada, and later to the oil boom town of Calgary. I tell this story partly to let you know who I am, but also how I came to be here. Multiple forces, including harsh and violent colonial rule, but also the privileges of passing as documented citizens. This is all that brought me here. And I return to my opening statement of deep appreciation for those who have accepted our families to this land. I do not promise to be the sugar in the milk, but I do my best to honor and abide where I'm privileged to live. I came to live here in 2013 because of many factors. One of the writers and thinkers I admired so greatly, Jeanette Armstrong, was of this land, and I had been privileged to work with both her and my dear friend Greg Young-Ing, who recently passed, at the Okanagan Center many years before. I had also been invited in prior years to an event then called the Summer Indigenous Graduate Institute, a remarkable set of week-long modules initiated by Stephen Foster and Mike Evans, who became fast friends and deep allies as we began working together further. And when I came here, the summer program had been put on hold, and working closely with Stephen, Mike, Greg, Jeanette, Marlo, and with the concerted assistance of Steve Loft at the Canada Council for the Arts, we grew into this thing called the Summer Indigenous Intensive. Those teaching here this year include many good old and new friends, Matt, Catherine, Alifa, Tania. Many have passed through here, artists and students alike, folks here today like Toby Lawrence, Krista Arias, Jamie Isaac, Stephen Davies, to name just a handful. And in the spirit of collaborations across land, I was delighted to bring with me this year, as Tania mentioned, a graduate cohort to join the one here at UBCO, 10 students from OCAD, representing 6 of our graduate programs. This is to participate in what we called an uncourse, an immersive learning environment that has included these lecture artist talks, salmon canning, lake visits, and a host of activities that are not bound by the classroom and renew an interest in how we learn together. Of course, so deeply, deeply integral to all of this is Tania Willard, who was an MFA graduate just a year ago, and now is an assistant professor in creative studies. And you all know the driving force behind this year's event. I thank you all. And before we move to our thrilling set of speakers, I'd like to acknowledge and bring up here a friend and colleague who has done tremendous work for Indigenous art at UBCO and across the country and indeed the globe for the past 16 years. His time here is almost done, and I know from numerous conversations that I'm being blamed for stealing him away. But the truth is that Stephen has much to offer on many scales, and although he will be sorely missed here, he will, I am sure, always be present through the legacies he has created, and I look forward to working with him as the new Dean of Art at OCAD University in the very near future. Everyone, please welcome Stephen Foster to the front.
Yeah, well, thank you. I didn't really have much to talk about or say today, so I'll keep it brief so we can move along to our talks and panels. This will be my last summer intensive this year. I am moving to OCAD University, I've been here for 19 years. I think I came here in 2000. When we came here, it's kind of interesting because I've been thinking about the differences of this institution, of course, has changed quite radically, but also just the differences in what it means to be able to practice Indigenous art in an institution, in a university. Certainly over the years. When I first started as an Indigenous artist in an art college on the West Coast there, back in the 80s, let's say. It wasn't something that you could practice or even be acknowledged in a classroom, working, either with traditional imagery, traditional materials. These things were kind of shunned. We've come quite a ways from that, for sure. But, there's still more ground, obviously, to make up. But, seeing this room full here now with this event is quite dramatic when I think back on those days. To be able to come together to, talk, discuss, argue about what it is to be an Indigenous artist, what it is to make Indigenous art, is in some ways quite extreme and quite extraordinary. I'm pleased about that. I'm also saddened by that a little bit because I'm going to miss this. Like I said, we've been working with the Summer Institute, the Summer Intensive, now for 13, 14 years. It's a long time. When we first started it, it was a lot of work to get people to think that you could do this and that it would be interesting and that people would want to come to these classrooms and they would want to partake. And it did. It changed the way people thought about how we study Indigenous art in general, as from the point of view of scholarship and of practice, rather than a kind of objectification or art historical objectification of the past. So it's a radical shift. And I think, when I think back about all the different people, scholars, artists we had, curators come through, it's totally amazing and humbling too. There's so much has been done over these years, so much good work. And then there's so much more to do. So, I'm hoping, and certainly I'll lend my support to it, but, as Tania moves forward in this, with this model, I'm really hopeful and positive about what could happen in the future. And so hopefully it'll continue. And maybe with everybody else's support here too. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. So just a word about our format today. We're going to have a couple of speakers come up first. We'll have Richard Armstrong, who's just arrived here to speak for about maybe half an hour or so, and that'll be followed by a keynote by Marion Nicholson. Because Marion will have to leave, we'll take brief questions at the end of that, and then we'll take a break before we head into the artist panel with Mariel, Sheldon, and Anne, and I'll introduce each of them in turn. So Richard Armstrong from the Penticton Indian Band, member of the Syilx Nation of the Okanagan Valley within the BC Southern Interior, is one of the nation's fluent speakers and traditional ecological knowledge keepers. Immersed in the Syilx language and culture as a child, he aims to assist those who need his help, his teachers, and teachings have helped him. Therefore, he shares who he is and what he has learned with the Okanagan Nation, his community, and welcomed guests. He's a teacher of the Syilx language and culture, both the Anaukan Center, UBCO. Through the use of Chaptik, Okanagan legends, he shares lessons through individual interpretation. He's a phenomenal thinker and someone I've admired for many years every time I've had an opportunity to have him here. He's a leader in the language and cultural revitalization of the Syilx-speaking people and understands the importance of collaborating with like-minded individuals on all levels. Please welcome Richard Armstrong.
Hello everybody, how are we today? Hey, what a day to be alive, huh? I always asked by my elders to announce my name because I carry an ancestral name that goes back about 800 years or so. And I'm always told that I have to acknowledge that Injai squish child, it lak to him a quala nas to him kakwent. Kilskan no ship kicken cool. Injai squish child, can shield a child to hula. Limblum tap nas kalhan. Thank you. My English name is Richard Armstrong. For those of you that don't know me, you're the lucky ones. I teach the language, the Nshilkchan language. I speak my language better than the English language. I still learning a lot of names, plants. My growing up is in the country. I grew up with my grandma and grandpa and elders. I was brought up and raised to be what they call a knowledge keeper. I'm not really sure what that means in English, but a lot of people seem to think I know everything, but I don't. I travel throughout my territory. I just recently came back from the Arrow Lakes, Slocan Lake, all of our territories up that way. I work with the elders in repatriation of ancient bones that have been turned up and returned back to the Shilluk people. I do a lot of things, but the thing that I really enjoy doing is teaching. I really enjoy teaching. I've been teaching here at UBCO for quite a few years, and I really appreciate being invited by Stephen to come and speak to you guys. My talk is not about art itself. I like to talk about, when you say Indigenous art, that's just this very small piece of the whole thing. But when you talk about Indigenous, me, us, the land, I want to tell you more about that. My mom is from Inchel, Washington, from the Colville Reservation. My dad is from Penticton. My grandmother is from what they call the extinct reserve out at the Old Scott Reserve on the Arrow Lakes. And I have lineage to Scotland and Ireland. So Heinz 57 right here. Anyway, when I think about what it is, that word Indigenous, and always I run into it all the time, and I hear some people, they wonder, should I call you Indigenous? Should I say First Nation? Should I call you Indian? Or, what should I call you? I said, well, I prefer to be called either Child or Richard, But labels like that, even the word Indigenous, to me is not really, I have really no idea what that word really means, but I know what it is to be, an Indigenous person, because I was raised to know all the old ceremonies and prayers and the language. I'm a carrier of the knowledge to do the salmon ceremony. The last salmon ceremony was done at Kettle Falls by my grandfather's grandfather, whose name is Kinkanahua. He was the last salmon chief at Kettle Falls, and my direct lineage goes back to the lineage that has to continue that work to do the ceremony at Kettle Falls, Castlegar, Revelstoke, McIntyre Dam, Enlow Dam, and recently at Shuswap Falls. talking about all the salmon that used to come back through these areas. When I talk about the salmon ceremony, it talks about the land. It talks about the fish that come up. It talks about being part of, not just, I think a lot of my students that I talk to, my nieces, my nephews and grandkids, when they think about salmon, all they think about is the salmon that, that they eat. And when we're brought up to think about our responsibility to the land, to nature, to doing the things that we say we are connected to. When we say we're connected to the land, it's a whole different worldview than Western society's worldview. When we say we're connected to the land, and I'd like to tell you a bit about that, because you don't find that in the museums or libraries or anything like that. That's information that's passed down from my ancestors and their ancestors. And that kind of information is information that was against the law for me to talk about. It was only removed from the law books in the 1960s, 68 up through 72, 1972. It was against the law for me to talk about what I'm just about to tell you when I get to it here. My dad almost was thrown in jail because he wanted to talk about that worldview that I want to tell you about. That Shield worldview, I never understood why it was against the law to talk about. That it was an indictable offense. If there was more than 9 people in a room and you talk about that, you're going to jail. Anyway, now there's more than 9 people and I won't go to jail for talking about it, so I want to tell you a little bit about it. What that worldview, the Shield worldview, talks about a time when there was no humans. There was only animals on this, what they now call North America. And our language, that's called Kshung, which means a large island. And there was 4 kingdoms on this Kshung. Everything with 4 legs, everything in the water, everything that used the air for mobility, that flies, everything that grows on the land with its roots. Those 4 kingdoms, the 4-leggeds, the water creatures, the flying creatures, and the plants with their roots, by our people and our legends and our stories, talks about a time called the animal people. These 4 kingdoms were like people. They spoke a language, they had great chiefs, great leaders, and everything else like that. And the 4-leggeds had different, like anything else, great leaders over time, but the one we talk about that's always there is the chief Skimchist. Skimchist is the bear. He speaks for and rules everything with 4 legs, speaks for everything with 4 legs on this land. And then there's Ntitich, Chief Salmon. He speaks for everything in the water, from the highest mountain to the deepest ocean. That's the water people. And the flying creatures on the land, We talk about Pakalkin, we talk about Malkanups, and most recently everybody refers to that kingdom as being ruled by the eagle, the bald eagle or the golden eagle. The last kingdom, the plants with their roots, was ruled by Speedlam, and that is the bitter root. There are another portion of that where it says that the berries themselves had a kingdom or a people. All the berries was ruled by Chief Sia, the Saskatoon berry. Now these kingdoms in our Chaptik lived in such perfect harmony on this Kisung. There was no disease or wars or anything like that. They lived in such perfect harmony. They depended on each other. Everything they ate was, all the good stuff that grows on the land. Not like the stuff I have, the MSGs from, where. It was a perfect world. Our Chaptik talks about that perfect world that spoke a language, and they were called animal people. From our stories, the Creator looked at that system and said that such a perfect system, if I took something from the four-leggeds, something from the water creatures, something from the flying creatures, something from the plants, and made the ultimate being, one ultimate being from the best there is. From our Chaptik, the Creator told the animal people, I'm going to take a piece from every one of you and create the most incredible ultimate being that you, with your 4 kingdoms, will be responsible for bringing your child up. This will be your responsibility to make sure that you provide everything that this ultimate being, your child, will need. When the Creator took a piece of the four-legged water creatures, flying creatures, and the plants and created that 4th being, our Chaptik tells us that the four-legged chief Skumchist looked at this, and the story says he looked at this thing, and when he said, that's my child, that's the ultimate being from the best there is, said, and I'm responsible to take care of this thing forever and ever and ever. I can't see this child of mine surviving even the first winter. It has no fur, it has no hoofs, it doesn't graze on the ground, How is this thing going to survive? As the parent of this ultimate being, the only thing I can give to it is myself. I will give it my hide to make something that'll keep him from freezing to death in the winter time and put something on his feet. But if he takes my hide, he's got to do something with the meat. And I don't know what he eats, but maybe he can consume my meat. And if he takes my meat, then he's got to use the bones and respect. There's protocols for all of that, of how we deal with that. Chief Skumchist says, that's what I will give my child. and I rule everything with 4 legs on this. Everything with 4 legs must provide for our child. Everything they need, you are to give it to our child. That's what Chief Scumchist gave to the first being. The water parent of ours looked at this ultimate creature and said, well, that's my child too, and as a parent I'm obligated to give it the best chance of survival. I gave my word to the Creator that I will provide for it to the best of my life. I will provide everything it needs because it can't live on only meat. It has to have the richness of the things from the water, the rich flesh, oil from the salmon, and the other things. Chief Ndidi said, because that's my child, I speak for everything that lives in the water from the highest mountain to the deepest ocean. Everything that my child needs as the ruler of all things in the water, my child can have. Now we have meat and we have fish and everything else in the water to balance off the meat and the fish. The flying parent of ours said, that's really good. You've given it your hide to make clothing. You've given it fish to help the diet. But look at our child. Our child only has 2 legs. You have 4 legs. How is our child going to get something to eat? And if you're going to use the fish in the water, how is our child going to get things out of the water? Our flying parent says, I will provide all the tools, all the know-how to make the devices that will help our child harvest 4-leggeds, harvest the water creatures. And as the parent of the ultimate creature, that's what I will provide. Everything that flies through the air will be his to take whenever he wants and needs it. The last parent to speak was the plant parent. The plant parent says, that's good, you give it meat, you give it fish, and you give it the tools to get it. Our child's more likely might survive, might have a chance, but look at our child. It doesn't graze on the land to eat the good herbs and the things that everybody else eats to keep it healthy, because it's eaten the flesh of the 4-leggeds and the water creatures. It's going to be sick. As the parent of all the plants, my gift to our child is to provide everything they need if they get sick, if they're not well in the stomach from eating strange things like meat and fish and whatever else. So from our plant parent, our plant parent says that's not complete yet. You've given it meat, you've given it fish, you've given it the things to get it. I've given it medicine, but that's still, they need vegetables, potatoes, carrots, onions, and celery, and those kind of things. And the plant says, my roots will provide those things. Now they have everything, the best that we can provide for our child. And that was the story that was so scary to the governments, because owning and having a worldview that says every tree out there is my parent, everything that you see, every creek, every animal, if I need it, I can go and harvest it and collect it. That was so scary to the Western society world that they joined forces with the black robes to take that idea out of our minds, because that would give them more easy access to the resources, what they call resources. Now, to me, growing up, I'm always asked my parents and my grandmothers, I was raised in the mountains, I went to school not speaking English. I went to a day school on the reserve. The classroom was from kindergarten to grade 8, all in one room. From there, went to the Catholic school, and from there to the public school in Penn High. So, thinking about all of that and everything that my folks and my elders told me about that story, I was very curious, and I asked a lot of questions, and I asked my kakana, my grandmother on my dad's side, I asked her, you said that the four-leggeds is my parent. I was created from a piece of the four-leggeds, a piece of the water creatures, a piece of the flying creatures, and a piece of the roots and the plants. I asked my kakana, if that's my parent, four-legged, which one is my parent? Look at how many four-leggeds there is, even that thing I hate the most, the mouse. That's got 4 legs. Do I have to admit that that's my parent too? What about the pesky mosquito? Is that my parent too, because it uses the air for mobility? I asked a lot of questions like that to my grandmother, and she told me, she said, when the Creator made that first being, that very first being, it asked the 4 food chiefs that they were to provide everything that we will ever need forever and ever and ever and ever. My grandmother told me, you, pointing at me, she told me, you're not like the animals. You have everything in you like the animals. You have things in you like the fish. You have things in you from the plants, and even from the roots you have it in you. That's who you are. And the reason there's so many four-leggeds, and you can't say which ones, they're all your parents. Why they're all your parents is because they told the Creator that they're going to take care of us forever and ever and ever. If one group of four-leggeds disappears, there will still be four-leggeds, and there will be four-leggeds of whatever different kinds of four-leggeds, whether it's moose, elk, deer, bear, grizzly, they all got 4 legs. Everything in the water is the same thing. There's so many different water creatures that will provide for that ultimate being. Now, I asked my grandmother also, if that's my parent, if anything you told me, if there's any truth to that, how did they teach me? Parents have an obligation to teach their child to give the best chance of survival. My grandmother told me, you remember when you were 13 or 12 years old, we took you up into the mountains and we did a ceremony with you called the home. I said, I remember that. And she said, what did you think of that? And I told my grandmother, I swore you guys were trying to kill me. I hate you guys. My grandmother said, well, the reason you were there for 3 days and we gave you just medicine, you had to have the ability to receive information from your real parents. To this day, I looked at many, many writings of the great anthropologists that came through our territory. Many of the great anthropologists that came through our territory lived with us, married our women, and they wrote what they thought they were seeing, including the puberty time training in the mountains and what that was all about. They wrote many different things, and when I started studying the different writings of the anthropologists, reading those great anthropological works made me laugh in some places, because the vast knowledge that we still have today, many of our people on the reserve, on the lands, and the people that are knowledgeable about plants, graduates that come and tell you, can I go with your grandmother out of the mountains and they can show me different plants? Botanists come to us, environmentalists come to us. We take them out, show them everything, medicines, poisonous, edibles. How do we know the difference between medicinal and edible? Some of those plants are identical. Botanists still have a hard time, especially the newer botanists can't really tell by looking, you know. When I asked my grandmother that question, she told me, that's how you know. Because the word that you hear, there's 2 words, Wurshiil, and every being, all of you, every creature that's human, is Skel. That word Skel comes from 2 root words. I speak the language really well and I know what the words are broken down into. The word Skel comes from space, literally meaning the brain has the power to dream and to be different than the brain of our animal parents. Space literally means the ability to dream, to think, and to visualize different things in our brain. And I asked my grandmother, well, so what? I mean, I can think, you know, and I mean, I'm sure the bears and the horses and everything else, they can think too. And she said, no, it's different. She said, when you grow up, you get a little older, we'll take you to the territory and we want to show you pictographs, what's called pictographs in your territory. I said, yeah, I know what pictographs are. I see them all over the trails I go hunting on and on the rocks. My grandmother told me every one of those pictographs there, when you look at it, is a picture of what our animal parent looked like in spirit form during that vision quest in the mountains high up. because we have so many different parents, that knowledge that comes to us, they come right into our brain because of speech, and they tell us, I'm your parent. And because I'm parent, I'm going to show you that you will never forget in your mind, this is poisonous, this is medicine, this is edible. They all look the same. That's how our vast knowledge was provided to us. These are the kind of things that are not told to people. And some of my elders right now are still very worried about me talking about that to students, to teachers, to the rest of the world. Because when you look at the way the anthropologists wrote it, they said our vast knowledge of plants, poisonous and medicinal, was by trial and error. You know, trial and error. Here, you try this. Oh man, you died, you know. If I mix it with this, you know, that would die, but trial and error is kind of ridiculous, you know. It didn't happen like that. It happened the way that I told you, that they came into our brain. How about the idea that when I first told you that the bear gave his hide to us for clothing, the complicated formula to turn skin into the softest cloth, that formula, trial and error, that's impossible to get that by trial and error. That came right from the parent ourselves. Here's how you turn my hide into cloth. These are the things that, to me, the kind of things I know that I'm have only a certain time to talk to you because they have this long stick with a hook, you know. Bang that and they drag me off the stage here. One of the things, you don't want to give me a microphone because I'll talk for 2 days. My friends, I know there's a lot of things that I should be talking about. I've barely touched the surface of the things that are meaningful to the Siil, to the people, and for scholars to be able to check that out, to ask somebody that knows, not to depend on the silly writings of the anthropologists. Quite a bit of it is true. I use quite a bit of it. Quite a bit of it is pretty good observation, but a lot of it is laughable. If you are a business, Limlimt, it lays spoors. Akal-Quailstamsman, Yatachai Toist, it lays spoors. In Zeist Quail is Joik is Tinichel, it lays some pain. Zakul stem Costosen, and that's Filson Hatchin, Pia, it lays Naxilo. Jack Mr. It's Thank you. Have a good day.